Well, don't fall off the truck, son. Oh my God. Well, I know one thing's for sure is that we're going to have to get the engine out. We're going to have to separate the transmission from it and get this engine on us. Hey!
Welcome back!
Me and Asher here is just discussing what we're going to have to do to kind of push this project along a little bit. You're probably wondering, well, hey, I haven't seen the S-10 in about 3 weeks. Well, go watch the stair video that we had to finish, and you'll understand why this thing was kind of put on the back burner. But we are back after this thing, and we're kind of making a plan of what we need to do next, which is going to start by getting the engine and transmission back out of this thing, separated, engine on a stand, and then we're going to have to do some welding and fabricating to box it in this K-member. So now, unfortunately, I was not able to show you this cross-member deal that I had put together because I recorded everything and then my...
You didn't have footage.
Well, yeah, in my electronic incompetency, I lost all my footage that I had to be able to put this video together. So I will quickly run through this because I know we talked about it a lot. So basically what we did is the cross-member that was incorrect, we still used the center bar with the center mount. We never cut that off. We left it in place and basically just had to re-weld it on this side. I don't have bolts in it, but you can see it sitting there. And on this side, I actually had to add a little piece of tubing, and we was able to still use this same side mount, but I did put a little bit of a jog in this pipe just so this would stay away from these bolt holes. But ultimately in the end, I talked about our angles and our degrees of the engine to match the rear end just out of sheer good luck.
We
didn't have to do anything. Once we set the cross member in place and bolted it all together, this thing was sitting down right at the correct pitch, and we do have about 5.5. I know that typically on a leaf spring race car you probably want to be 6, but it was between 5.5 to 5 3/4. So since this isn't a trans brake truck right now, we're just going to run with it. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to use the great picker of cherries, and we're going to use this to get that engine snapped out of here.
So traditionally, usually go through the front of the vehicle with the old picker of cherries to get these things out of here. But since the cab is sitting pretty much on the back tires, this thing isn't going to roll. So we're going to try to stab this thing kind of on an angle through here. And I think it's going to be just long enough to pick this thing up so we can snatch this out of here. Then I will show you that notch in the frame that we cut out that we will have to box in with all new steel. Good times.
Ah, this is just perfect. I'm going to snatch my glove in here.
Try to hook it in the middle as best as you can on that chain.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
How in the world did you get this thing on here last time?
For the love of Mike. Why don't you crank on that thing and see what happens?
Why is the thing moving?
This is trial and error. We're just going to have to see what it does.
Well, the whole stupid thing is moving.
Let me see if I can get the bolts out. Come on, bolt.
Oh, my goodness.
Now I have to get the bolt out of the other side. Can you lay that on the toolbox? What?
Making me do all the work.
Yeah, we're going to have to lift it up higher in order to get this one out.
Oh gosh, things are going pounds.
Oh, we gotta get down there, reaching out of the truck. Oh, this tool. Oh, there it is. We gonna need a battery. All right.
Got one in here, you watermelon picker.
What did you call me?
Watermelon picker.
Watermelon pan?
Picker.
A watermelon picker? Wrong side. Why'd you tell me it was a 15, Ash? It's a 17.
That's your fault. That thing don't have enough torque in it.
It's coming. It's just slow. I know all of you saying, you know, well, if you would have had the Makita or the Milwaukee version, it would have done it better. Probably, but this was a lot cheaper.
Your mom and dad bought it for you, so you didn't even pay for it. Oh, you just got roasted.
My mama bought me that tool, and I'm going to use it. So I think we're going to use a ratchet strap, and we're going to go from this back up to this chain just to put some torque on this side of the engine. Go ahead and take her on up, bud.
I'm trying, but there's something connected to it.
Oh, don't worry about that old brake line. We're going to have to replace all that anyway.
Mr. Ultimate Dad can barely even do it.
Okay, so now we got this thing out of this chassis. And I'm telling you what, these chassis, you don't get much more stripped down than what this is right now. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect our Turbo 350 and shove that under a bench or somewhere just to get it out of the way for now. So this here is the K-member, if you don't know that. So when you hear K-member, that's what we're referencing to. That's the crossover, the very first crossover beam on any vehicle. But as you can see how much material we had to take away in order to get this factory LS oil pan to clear into this thing. Now, I notched it just a little bit originally when I was able to set the engine, just the engine without the transmission, straight down. But I didn't take into consideration that I'm going to want to install this as a package, transmission engine combo. So where it goes in on an angle, there wasn't enough room. Couldn't do it, not with the cab on the truck. So that's why we had to take out so much more material. Now, I am going to open this up just a little bit wider because this here was just enough for this to fit. So we're going to cut this and open this up just maybe a ½ inch more on each side. And then with our same gauge sheet steel that we have, we're going to come back in here and box all of this in. Doing it this way and just leaving it that way, that doesn't offer a whole lot of structure for this. So we definitely want to box this in to kind of give it the rigidity that it needs. All right, let's get back after this thing. We are going to see if we can't go ahead and cut out from this steel with that plasma cutter and get our steel ready for what we're going to have to do to box in this K-member. Now, when I first did my original cuts with the right angle grinder, I didn't get this completely true on this side, so I measured it out, made a little chalk line. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. That way I'm working with some flat, straight, true edges. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to box in these sides with plate, this plate. And then from here, we're going to go from this straight down to here and then fully weld that in, which will give this K-member a taper, plus this notch right here. Plenty enough room for our oil pan and everything to clear. All right, so now that we got these measured up and we got these square, we're just going to take a piece of cardboard and we're going to just make a template of what our side panels are going to look like. Make my marker here. This can be any piece of old cardboard. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but we're going to put this thing up right up against the center of this K-member. And to the best of our abilities, we're just going to draw a line. Now this ain't anything fancy other than just going around and cutting the template out. Like I said, we're going to go just on the inside of this. I'd say that fits pretty good. We will notch out this little edge just so it sits over top this double weld. It's like double layered steel right there, so it really kind of beefed it up a little bit. Now that we have our template made, we're going to go ahead and transfer this to the piece of steel we're going to use. And we'll trace out our notch and then go ahead and trace around the edge here. Looks like a good enough mark for me. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can get our notch cut out first. All right, let's go ahead and get the rest of this bad mamma jamma cut. All right, and you can see here how we got our other side traced out too. It's for the passenger side. You know, have as little scrap as possible. So we'll be able to save the majority of this sheet, just have this little bit of scrap here at the edge. We're gonna call that a win and go ahead and get this cut out while that piece is cooling. Now that our piece is cold, we're gonna go ahead and just kind of clean up our edge. It's great. See, as you can see, now you can kind of get a better idea which way we're going with this. So now that this is blocked and capped, that side is blocked and capped, we're going to get a measurement now, and we're going to go from this top piece that I'd cut, and we're going to taper it all the way down to here. So it's just going to be kind of like slanted on an angle going up. But from all the measurements that I did, that'll give us the clear shot with the engine trans to be able to come back in here together. And like I mentioned before, this is all because I'm using the factory LS truck oil pan, which is, yeah, it sits a little lower than K-member, but for what we're doing with this truck, it'll be fine. But let's go ahead and get measured up and see if we can't rip us out this piece that we're going to need. Okay, so give you a little close up now. Both sides cut, capped, and then we have our plate. Let me try to get a better angle of this thing. You can kind of see how it's tapered now. That'll allow the transmission and engine to slide right in there. Now, this is rough form. I still got to clean all this up. I got to take the wire wheel to get all the paint off. We're going to do all that before we weld it. But see, this factory S-10 has this little bump out in the K-member. We're not going to worry about that right now. Once we get this all welded in, before we start, with our flapjack wheel and polishing and smoothing it all out, we're going to go ahead and cut us a little piece to just fill in there. I know you don't see it, and there's other holes. It's not like it's really going to matter, but it matters to me. I can't, in good faith, let that go. Well, there you have it. She's mostly burnt in. I still got to do up underneath the bottom and then tie in a little piece up there at the top. But for the most part, she's doing what she's doing. But we're going to hang it up for tonight and just let that thing cool off. It is sizzling. So let's give that thing some time to rest, and then we'll get back on to making our little filler pieces and then wrapping this thing up. Well, there you have it. We got about as far as what we're going to get right now. I'm going to get you in there right quick for a little closer look at what we did. As you can see, the traditional path of this original K-member was from here to here. So for you out there who might be interested in doing this and you're wondering why I did it this way, this doesn't make it the right way. This is the way that I did it. And the reason why is because with using a factory LS truck 5.3, I know they're all the same, but the factory oil pan needs that clearance in order to slide this thing in there. Now, you don't have to clearance it that much if you're just going to set the engine down in here. But when the cab of this bad boy is back on here, I wanted to be able to pull transmission engine combo out together, and this is what needed to happen. I know different frames, different models might be a little bit different. This is what I had to do, and you could go back on some of the previous videos and you'll see how much I had to nip and tuck around the firewall and all this to get this to happen. But this is on a slope, and it's on that slope for a reason. Now, off this edge, this very front edge right here, I went down 1 inch. It took 1 inch of notching from the top of this top rail. So 1 inch down, and then on this bottom side, this is 1.5 inches. I went in 1.5 inches, and I flattened that out. All I did from that point was the side plates, and then I just ran a piece to taper from here to here, and then this is just a little filler piece. But the reason why it's angled is because I did some measurements and calculations, and with the engine and transmission in here, and naturally it's going to go on, go in on an angle and then sit down. That slope was just enough clearance for that to sit down in there. So right, wrong, or indifferent, I know there's a lot of guys might have done it different. That's completely fine. You do what works for you. This is what works for me. And yeah, it's some cutting and welding and all that, but hey, you know what? It saves me from having to buy an oil pan. Now, one thing that I also did do that, again, it's not necessary to do, but I did this for future headache, to save a future headache, essentially. These motor mounts on these S-10s, the original bolts go through the K-member, and the only way to access those bolts is by removing the lower control arm. It's a really, really difficult process to get to those bolts, just to change your motor mounts. So what I went ahead and did, bam, we made studs. This is the Dirty Dingo mounts. I don't know if I'm sold on that. I've seen some other aftermarket ones that are kind of more the solid plastic bushings, and these are the rubber ones. I don't know how much these are going to let the motor flex, but we're going to give them a whirl. It doesn't really matter. Even if I want to change these motor mounts down the road by that little simple conversion to making studs instead of the 3 bolts, that'll be an easy thing to swap. So with that being said, we are pretty much done with what we're going to do on the frame. I'm going to take off some brake lines there, just take the lights, the wiring for the lights. I'm going to take all that stuff off. And we're going to start prepping this thing for paint. However, even here in North Carolina, we have some unusually cold weather coming up. So what we're going to do is just going to let this set for a little bit, because we got to get this thing backed out, pressure washed. I mean, we got to clean every nook and cranny, and it's supposed to get kind of cold here. So I don't think that we're going to set our shop up for paint probably for not another 2 weeks. Weather's supposed to come back around. So we're going to focus on our attention, now that this is completed, on getting this LS oil pan back off this thing. Because if you remember in I think it's the first video I did on this truck, that I rebuilt everything in this motor, all the bearings, all the seals, everything. All of it's new. Sloppy stage 2 cam, stock heads. What are those? What are those heads? I don't even remember what they are. 862 heads, truck heads. They're nothing, it's nothing fancy. It just, has a better cam in it, and, the rings are gapped for boost, which we're planning on doing this truck. But what I didn't do was upgrade the rod bolts on these factory rods. I'm not hiding anything on this build. It is bone stock, except for cam and springs. My dyno tuner that's going to be doing the tuning on this truck, he did recommend that at the very least, I went with the ARP rod bolts. So I got a set of those. We're going to slap that in here. And once we do that, we're going to go ahead and get our new flywheel like permanently mounted. There's only a couple bolts just holding it there. And then we're going to use this old crappy starter that came on this motor. And we're going to spin it around. Probably put some oil in it, spin it around, see if we can get some oil pressure built up in it. And then I got a new starter to hang on that. I don't even know if that one works, but if it can work good enough just to spin this thing over for a little while, just to, put some oil pressure through it, we're going to go that route with it. So engine's going to be the next video. We'll go how-to on how to do that. And hopefully that weather will break enough that we can get this cab off this thing onto some sawhorses and then push this frame out, get this thing cleaned up and ready for work paint, because that is when it starts to get exciting. And I'm ready for things to get a little exciting. This part gets a little monotonous. You don't see a lot of this part on YouTube. There's a whole lot of first starts and videos based on one single thing, like just installing an 8.8 rear end. But listen, a lot of you guys have been through this process, but there's a lot of guys that haven't. And I don't expect everybody to watch every single video. But if there's a point in one of these videos that might help somebody out that's stuck in a certain situation, hey, that's all we're after. Making somebody better, encourage them to get out there, play with some tools, acquire some tools, test their ability. Isn't that what this is all about? We got to lift each other up in these projects. So not everything that I'm doing here is what somebody else would do. Everybody's got different tastes. That's completely fine. This is the way we're going with it, and we're going to be happy with it and excited. And we are anxious to start putting parts back on this frame, because it gets a little bit discouraging when you see this thing exploded in a million pieces for, an extended period of time. So we are really close to making headway going back the other way. I got some drive shaft parts ordered so we can actually make a drive shaft for this thing. So we're clicking along. So we want to thank you for watching this video, and we will see you next week. And if you haven't, like and subscribe. It helps us out, shows us you're interested, that you like the content that we're doing, and it helps keep the motivation up on the truck projects, the DIY projects and all that, and we'll keep bringing videos to you. Thank you.